Sure. So I have two great friends here to be able to give us a lot more information to help us set that path forward. One of them is Priyanka from World Education, the vice president there, and she is just a wonderful asset. World Education is a wonderful partner with COABE, and so we thank you so much for being here. And also from the U.S. Department of Education is GC Song, who is going to be telling us more about those new opportunities, grant opportunities that hopefully we can all go ahead and put our hands in a pot for. So without further ado, I'm gonna turn it over to you first, Priyanka, and then we'll hear from you a little bit later. Thank you.
Thanks, Shakira. Hello, everyone. I'm Priyanka Sharma from World Education, and it is so wonderful to see so many new faces and so many faces of people I respect and have learned from over the years, and a lot of my own staff who I learn from every day. It has been a complete pleasure from on World Education's behalf to be part of, I want to say, we had our own vision of how do we move digital equity forward within the context of adult education as the Digital Equity Act passes, because there's so much innovation that happens on a continual basis within the field of adult ed. We were really invested in how can we amplify it as just our organization. And then Jisoo happened. I think his vision really brought us all together from COABE, because we talk to each other a lot and try to work together as much as we can. But I feel like a lot of the credit, if not all the credit, goes to the Office of Ed Tech and Jisoo's leadership to really have a thoughtful coming together of various organizations. You can see our tiny logos in the prior slide, and including COABE and a lot of others. And it has been a complete pleasure to really band together and use our complementary strengths to start to spread the word about the opportunities that are available currently, opportunities that lie ahead, but then also really finding out ways to build on each other's strengths and the work that we're already doing. And with that, I just want you to be very present and intentional as we talk about different ideas. And hopefully by the end of our time together today, you have new and really cool ways of working with each other. And we have some technology to help us along the way. So welcome everyone, and Jisoo.
Awesome. So now I can take a breather because I was in the middle of like a short panic because the audio didn't feed into the online attendees, but now it works. So I am much calmer now. Whew. Happy St. Patrick's Day. I don't have a green suit, so I feel like I'm ill for the occasion, but I guess blue will do for now. But thank you, Shakira, and thank you, Priyanka, for those introductions. My name is Jisoo Song, serving as the Digital Equity Advisor for the Office of Educational Technology, where my work over the course of this administration has fallen in that digital equity and inclusion bucket. First, I really want to really show my appreciation to COABE for offering space for this pre-conference discussion. I want to give a huge shout out to our World Ed colleagues for being great thought partners and collaborators as we tried to pull off this hybrid convening. I think you may have asked this question as I was figuring out the audio and video, but who's at the COABE conference for the first time this year? So I'm not the only newbie here, so that gives me an additional level of confidence. So I'll talk very briefly about where this idea came from for this discussion, right? So over the past in 2021, the bipartisan infrastructure law got passed, and we knew that the Digital Equity Act gave us a great sort of policy lever to make sure that all of our learners in K-12 and higher ed and adult ed had access to those technology tools that will grant them opportunities beyond what's available right now. And we collaborated, in depth with our colleagues over at NTIA, at the FCC, to make sure that our needs of learners are, center as they roll out their programs and policies, right? And then in the middle of 2023, we were thinking, okay, states are working on these digital equity plans. We've been meeting with each of them to make sure that the needs of learners are being thought about as they develop those plans. What's next? Oh, there's these grant opportunities that are coming up that will be available to a huge range of adult education stakeholders. How do we make sure that the education sector doesn't miss out on this opportunity, right? So I talked to our Assistant Secretary for Policy a little bit, who you'll hear from at the end. And he said, let's make sure that we're, doing all we can to build awareness behind these important programs, and then build excitement for these programs, and then have folks early in 2024 generating some really, really good ideas that they could pitch to our colleagues at NTIA once those notice of funding opportunities go live, right? We wanted to take that sort of long runway approach so that, once the grant opportunities are announced, we're not sort of rushing to get our partnerships and sort of ideas together. We want to make sure that you all have ample opportunity to think about what could my role be as a catalyst for digital equity in the adult education sector, which is so diverse and so powerful in making sure that our learners, have opportunities beyond what they have right now. So with that out of the way, just a few housekeeping notes. First, there's handouts on each of your tables. Please use that to take notes as you hear from our panels at the top of the hour, because you will need it when we go to our breakout discussions. If you want a digital copy, I'll leave this slide up for the bit.ly link as well as the QR code. Second, we have a Padlet. I love Padlet. I'm not supposed, from the U.S. Department of Education, I'm not supposed to endorse any products. So this is just an example of a tool that you can use for conferences, right? So please use the Padlet to drop in any questions that you may be wondering about. The leftmost column is our parking lot for all your questions. So that's where you can drop in it. So I'll leave these two QR codes and bit.ly links up if you want to access the digital copies. So with those opening remarks and housekeeping notes out of the way, I'll invite my colleagues from NTIA, the National Telecommunications and Information Administration from the Department of Commerce, as well as the National Digital Inclusion Alliance to the stage for a quick fireside chat with me on things that this audience should know about. Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, it's okay.
Awesome. Well, thank you to our colleagues from both NTIA and NDIA for joining us for this conference. Maybe starting with Shauna and then going to Bio, could you just briefly, introduce yourselves, your organizations, what you do? Would love all these folks to know what cool things that you're involved in right now.
Yeah, hi, my name is Shauna Edson. I'm from the National Digital Inclusion Alliance. I'm based in Salt Lake City, Utah, but we are a national organization. Before I came to the National Digital Inclusion Alliance as a senior policy manager, I worked at the Salt Lake City Public Library as a technology and digital equity manager for 7 years. So I got to partner with a lot of adult education organizations and individuals. So it's really an honor to be here.
Thank you for those introductions, Bio.
Hello, everyone. My name is Bio Adetunji. I'm a digital equity advisor at NTIA, National Telecommunications and Information Administration. I'm only 4 months old there. But before then, I was with the Maryland Department of Labor as a grants manager, education program specialist for about 7 years. So I worked with Title II adult education providers that are mostly community college based, some CBOs, and also a few public school systems. So as I indicated, I've been with NTIA, part of the Department of Commerce, focusing on Digital Equity Act. Thank you.
So it's been really, really great as a Department of Education being able to collaborate with both NDIA and NTIA to make sure that the needs of our learners for some opportunities can be thought about as NTIA rolls out their programs and National Digital Inclusion Alliance advocates for different stakeholder groups. So Shauna, I'll actually start with you for the first questions. There may be folks joining us in person or online that might be kind of new to the topic of digital equity, right? So could you help them sort of gain a basic understanding of what we're talking about? What's digital equity? What's digital inclusion? Why are these concepts so important for the adult education sector, especially?
Yeah, great, thank you. Well, as somebody who is a non-traditional student and a lifelong learner, adult education is really close to my heart. And I personally experienced the overlap between digital equity and adult education as a adult college student. While my kids were in elementary school, most of the time that I was in college, I had to start below college level to get there. So most of that time, I was a single parent trying to work a couple jobs and hustle. Sometimes I didn't have internet in my home. Sometimes I didn't even have a cell phone. So that meant I had to rely on public computer labs to be able to get my coursework done, which meant I needed a car and transportation and parking, or public transportation, which in my city takes up a lot of really valuable time, or pay for childcare, or try to entertain kids in a public setting while studying, which is just nearly impossible. So through that work, my own experiences, I learned about digital literacy. I was struggling to learn how to use the online learning platform. At this time, the cloud was brand new. That's about 10 years ago. So file management was a huge issue, and just really trying to use technology in a way I never had before. So I learned about digital literacy and some foundational skills. And I discovered digital equity was this huge field and realized it was something that I wanted to work in. So with our community, NTIA has created definitions for these key terms. The digital divide is the gap between those with affordable access, skills, and support to effectively engage online and those who do not have access. Digital equity is the goal. Digital equity is where all individuals have the technology capacity needed to participate in society, democracy, and the economy. And digital inclusion is the work. Affordable, appropriate devices, affordable, high-speed internet, ongoing technical support, and digital skills training. So another example of how that fits into adult education, during my time at the Salt Lake City Public Library, I did a partnership between the city library, a community learning center, and an adult education and training center. The Adult Education and Training Center offered an online high school completion course, and they hosted a classroom class one night a week at the Community Learning Center. The Community Learning Center was an ideal location because parents were already dropping their young students off at the elementary school and middle school right next to the Community Learning Center, so they were there. And then I came in as a library staff person with a public computer lab and offered additional studying and training sessions. So that gave, some of the students had access at home to computers and internet and had digital skills, so they were able to just hop right on and start working on their completion work. But not all the students did. So some students, that was the only time they could work on that online coursework, was during those computer lab hours. They also needed foundational skills. I'm sure all of you know that can include sometimes even learning how to set up an email address or how to navigate a website and create an account and password management and all of those things. So during those study session times, we created a community where it was a small group of about 12 folks who supported each other and really started to develop a sense of belonging with technology. And I'm sure all these stories are very familiar to you all. I don't think I'm saying anything new or surprising. So I can't wait to see what happens next with digital equity in adult education.
Bio, anything you'd like to add on to that?
Yeah, thanks, Shanna. I was just going to add as well that before I came to NTIA, I thought that adult education was actually the only entity that did digital equity and digital literacy. I didn't know that there was an agency whose main focus is on digital literacy and digital equity. So essentially, I was with the Maryland Department of Labor Adult Education during the pandemic. And that was when the reality hit everyone about the importance of this. But I know, just to say that when I'm in the presence of adult education stakeholders, whether you're a teacher, a provider, or in whatever capacity that you touch adult education, I was just discussing with one of my colleagues there before I came to the platform that I'm starstruck, actually. It's like I'm in the presence of great people. Some of you are instructors, some of you actually work with correctional education, and that's what you are all, that's what it's all about. When I go to NTIA, I realized that close alignment, and I think Shana mentioned that, between adult education and digital equity. The first thing that I did, not knowing much about the Digital Equity Act, was to actually reach out to my colleague at the Maryland Department of Labor, who's now the director. I said, by any means, do you know anything about NTIA? Do you know anything about digital literacy? And then she mentioned BEAD, the BEAD program. So I looked at the mission, the goal of the Digital Equity Act, and also of adult education. They're about building, identify barriers, reducing barriers, and empowering people, lifting them out of poverty to be able to meet their goals. So digital equity, as Shana mentioned, is that condition where everybody has that technology capability, the skills that they need, not just the tools and the devices, but they also have the skills that they need to be able to use that technology to find, evaluate, and use it responsibly, and to create and to be able to communicate as well. And the inclusion part of it is where all of those activities that we all do, that you do as an adult education stakeholder, and that the teachers do, and then everybody else who works with this, what NTIA calls the covered population, all those activities that we do to be able to achieve that goal. So that's what I wanted to add to that.
Thank you for allowing our participants to gain this understanding of what digital equity is. And thank you, Shauna, for sort of underlining the fact that this is work that the adult education sector does on sort of a daily basis. They might not call it digital equity, they might not call it digital inclusion, but this is work that you all are already steeped in. So I hope this can reinforce some of the thought processes that you're going on right now. So please use those handouts to take additional notes. But second question, Bayo, I'd love to go to you for this one. I talked about it a little bit, but you being from that actual agency would probably have a lot more information than I can give. And I never want to speak on behalf of another agency. So what are some of the relevant policies at play to advance digital equity in adult education that this room full of folks should know about right now? Can you share a little bit about the digital equity capacity and the digital equity competitive grant programs, and what the adult education sector especially can expect from each of those programs this year?
Okay. Thanks, so to the second question about, or the second part of the question about if I can share anything about the digital, the capacity NOFO, and also, sorry, the capacity Act, and also the Competitive Act. No, no, I cannot, because I got a wagging of the finger not to say anything about those. But jokes apart, the Digital Equity Act, I'm sure everybody probably in this room and online as well is probably familiar with the Digital Equity Act under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act bill that was passed, I think 2021, 2022. People have described it as the largest, the most ambitious effort to identify barriers and to meet these needs that actually constitute barriers to a covered population. So the Digital Equity Act itself has three components, as we know. It has there's a state planning grant, and also which states, under that award, states, all the 50 states in the country, including the territories, including Washington, DC, and the tribal entities received a certain amount of funding to create a state plan with that are supposed to meet certain requirements, where they're supposed to identify digital assets, create measurable objectives. And one of the things that is very interesting about that state plan is the fact that adult education, my favorite thing, adult education is mentioned as a core partner in that respect. And I was thinking, why not? Because of course you don't want the state or the administrative entity or the state broadband office creating a state plan that is not connected to the reality on the ground. Adult education stakeholders are mentioned in the statutes as one of the partners that they have to collaborate with. In my capacity, I have reviewed not all of the state plans that have been submitted, but I've reviewed some of them. what I'm always looking for is adult education, right? I guess because, you know, I was tricked into it. Being with adult education for a very long time, I'm thinking about where is adult education here? And also the fact that adult education also serves the same covered population that are mentioned in the statute, for instance. You know, so in creating those measurable objectives and in attempting to create a plan that will close the digital divide or identify solutions to the problems that our covered populations are having, we need to have all of the stakeholders, including adult education, at the table as well, so that the solutions that we're creating actually align with the needs that have been identified. So having said that, there are 15 programmatic and statutory requirements that the state plan has to address. So we looked over the plans to ensure that all these requirements have been met. So that's at this point, all 50 states in the country have submitted a digital equity plan. And the next one is the capacity NOFO that I cannot mention, that I cannot say much about, and also the competitive NOFO. The only thing I can say about the capacity NOFO is what's already in the statute. For instance, we know that the government is going to give the funding to implement the state plans. So what do we need to do? We need to be very familiar with the state plan. All of the needs that have been identified, all the assets. Perhaps they have not identified all of the assets that there are. Perhaps there are others. They need your help because you have the experience, essentially. You've worked with the covered population. You've worked with incarcerated individuals. Even if you haven't worked directly with them, you work with the people who work with them. So they need your expertise. They need your skill set in implementing all these activities. As far as the competitive grant is concerned, as it implies, it's gonna include a broader set of eligible entities beyond the ones that are mentioned in the state plan and the capacity under the capacity NOFO as well. So as I indicated, there isn't much that has to be said until the NOFO has been released. So it would also focus on providing funding to be able to implement digital equity activities that have been identified and that will be connected to the state plans that have already been developed. So we have to continue to be connected to that in that respect. So yeah, so some of the policies that I wanted to mention. Did I address the other part of it?
Yeah, thank you so much for that overview. And Shauna, I know you have a lot more flexibilities on what you can say because you're not a government entity. So do you want to sort of put NTIA spin on what maybe your interpretations are for these grants, what you're expecting? And, you know, yeah, I think that'd be great. But I know how it feels from being from a government agency, like being not allowed to say a couple of different things that are internal. So thank you so much for sharing what you're able to share. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Bio. I'll just build on what you said a little bit. Again, I don't work for the federal government, even though there's just one letter difference between the NDIA and the NTIA. So I can give you what NDIA thinks might happen. So we think that the state capacity NOFO is likely to come out in the next month or month and a half or so. And like Bio said, it's very tied to your state digital equity plan. So find out who in your state is working on that state digital equity plan if you don't already know. Read through, see what they have, what they're talking about, and see what you can do to get involved with your state. Most states have a state broadband office now. And I also do want to give a shout out to the NTIA. This is the first time in history. Every state has had a state digital equity plan, which is an enormous undertaking and very exciting for the field. The federal competitive grant, NDIA, again, as not a federal employee, we believe that as per law, the competitive grant NOFO will come out at the end of September, based on when Louisiana got their planning grant. So with that in mind, the competitive grant is likely to be exactly what it says, very competitive. So NDIA recommends if you're looking for applying to the competitive grant without having seen the NOFO, we suggest going with what we're calling a hub and spoke model. So one large grant with multiple organizations. What type of organization could take the lead? It could be at a state level, at a regional level, looking for really large grants for this that also work with smaller organizations to reach that like micro level community work. And so a big collective impact is what we believe will be most beneficial for those competitive grants. Also thinking about that, again, I haven't seen the NOFO, so I'm not sure what it's going to say. Also thinking about digital equity policy that's important for adult education right now is the Affordability Connectivity Program, which gives a $30 benefit for folks to have go toward internet bills in homes. Most internet service providers narrowed that down to $30, so it's been free for folks. $75 on tribal lands benefit. The FCC has announced that this will run out of funding. The last full month will be April of 2024. So there is a bill in place right now. It's the ACP Extension Act, which is $7 billion worth of funding that would fund the program through the end of this fiscal year. So we're all holding our breath that that goes through. It's bicameral, bipartisan effort. But without that funding, you might see a decrease of folks. There's 23 million Americans signed up for the program right now. So all those people will need to find a new home internet solution if this doesn't get funded, which there's a lot of overlap between the covered populations and adult education populations that you work with. So that's something to keep in mind as well moving forward.
Thank you for those insights. So because of the timing, I'm going to move on to our last question so that we can move on to the panel discussion after this. But knowing what we, which is very limited, how can the adult education sector best prepare for some opportunities that are coming this year under the Digital Equity Act? As folks go throughout today's workshop, what should they be thinking about? What should be front and center in their minds as they discuss with each other about how they can serve as a catalyst for digital equity in the adult education sector?
One of the things that I was thinking about is the wealth of experience that adult education stakeholders have. Actually, I think I mentioned at the top of the half hour that I'm very familiar with adult education, and I see this close alignment with adult education and the Digital Equity Act. And your experiences actually do matter. Your skills working with the population that you work with. Look at all of the covered populations that we have that the Digital Equity Act identifies. I think adult education works with all of the covered population. We work with individuals with low literacy skills, English language learners, people with disability. You work with veterans, and most veterans already have their high school diploma, so they're maybe not good. You work with older population. You work with blanking on the rest of the covered population. So, so your skill set, your experience working with this population, you know how to design instruction, including you, culturally competent instruction, and the whole digital literacy aspect of because digital literacy is actually a part of the Digital Equity Act, even though it's about equity, it's about inclusion. But there is no, after you have all the devices and the internet connectivity and all, you see the skill set. And something else that comes to mind, which is instructors, right? The adult education instructors, because adult education instructors do not know if they don't have the skills as well to be able to teach the skills that matter, provide this instruction to adult education learners, for instance, they will not be able to attain the skills that we're looking at. So what I'm saying is that you have the experience, you have the skills, you have done this assessments as well. So when, since digital literacy, building digital literacy skills is part of the Digital Equity Act, your experience matters and your voice matters. You can help, you can collaborate with the entities that are going to administer the capacity and the competitive local as well to be able to achieve their goals. Now, one of the other things is that if you don't know your state's broadband office, for instance, I would encourage you to know who's your state broadband office is. And actually, in each state, we have a federal program officer and FPO. Some of you are probably familiar with that. Be familiar with also your state FPO. And for each region, I think there are 8 regions. I don't want to put in there. For each region, there is a digital equity advisor. I happen to be the one for the West region. So your state has a federal program officer and most likely an SBU. So be familiar with that. And also, if anything else fails, digitalequity.gov is our email address. If you send an email to that, it will come directly to us if you have any questions. If there are things out there, public comments and ways that your voice can be heard, that's important. That's the other thing that I will leave behind. So.
Again, Bio said so much. Thank you. I'm going to build on it just a little bit. The state digital equity plans, get involved, find out what's going on. But also, as Bio mentioned, you are, and I hope I'm saying your name right.
Yes.
Okay, you are the experts. You are the folks who are working in this field every day. As you're thinking of your grants and proposals.
I am Priyanka Sharma, as I said before, and we're going to have a really interesting discussion with my brilliant panelists here. We started this morning with Bio and Shauna and Jisoo talking about sort of like the overall policy context. I feel like we're at a place where we don't really have to talk a lot about the why of digital literacy and the digital divide. It's more a conversation about how and how soon we can start, and how we can sort of really amplify our work together. And we're going to shift into this idea of policy is great. It's the engine that drives practice forward. But for the next 45 minutes, we're going to delve a little deeper into some practices, models, system buildings work that our panelists have been doing. And the idea of which is to get some of your creative juices flowing and also spark ideas as we think about involving ourselves, our communities, our systems into the state Digital Equity Act work. And especially thinking about new ways of working together for potentially see how we can come together for a competitive grant as a system, or across states as well. So without further ado, I would love to hear a quick introduction from each one of you and your name, title, and what energizes you about your work on a daily basis.
Okay, guess I'll go first. My name is Sarah Wheeler. I am the state director in New Hampshire. I've been the state director for about 5 years, and I've been in the state office for 10. And I came to digital equity work. I think it was Jason who said something about the long runway. It was a fairly long runway. In the spring of 2021, when we formed a committee under our Full Families Approach to Jobs, which was a new initiative in the state, and there was a subcommittee specifically for digital empowerment for every family, and I've been involved in that since 2021. And the idea was to prepare for that possible federal funding to address digital equity. And been working with that group, also working on the State Asset Advisory Committee, representing adult education. Not necessarily because it's required, but because I was there and already doing the work. And then also working on regional, forming regional coalitions to develop representation, and more recently being digital change agent for COABE.
Nice to meet you. I'm Eric Toten. I'm the Director of Strategic Initiatives for a nonprofit organization called Lead for America. Lead for America has been around for about 6 years now. It was actually founded by a group of 21-year-olds in their college dorm rooms. Each of them came from rural or small town communities, and they were really struck by the kind of talent pipeline challenges in those areas, and they wanted to create a service program that allowed rising civic leaders to
from time to time, this focus rate disconnects from the laptop, so I'm continuing to monitor it in case it does disconnect. I think it happened now, but yeah, I was doing a panel and it automatically disconnected, so I'm just trying to monitor it. So
each of them is tackling some sort of challenge related to the digital divide. So that access side, it could be on the adoption side. But we're really hoping for this to be one of the kind of largest and fastest growing national service programs that is exclusively focused on bridging those digital gaps in communities across the country. And from an adult learning perspective, I think we address adult learners in 2 ways. First, we have a lot of core members who are adult learners themselves. We're very proudly intergenerational. So that's one way. And then the other is, regardless of what age you are when you're serving, there's a good chance you're going to be interacting with adult learners, helping them with those digital access or adoption. So excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
And in the spirit of sharing and collaborating, we're gonna model and share that that theme or that.
Sorry, we'll go back to you.
Hello, I'm Kristen Benson, and I'm with Rural List Local Initiative Support Corporation. I'm a senior program officer there, and have been since 2020 working on both broadband planning with economic development organizations in rural communities across the country, and with frontline service organizations, including adult education organizations on a digital connector, digital skilling, digital access program. It's been a fantastic journey, and I think what energizes me about the work is both sides of that. The idea that infrastructure programs like the forthcoming BEAD program that I mentioned can really be a driver of economic development in markets that are transitioning and seeking to be attract workers and the populations that are again across rural America, but also the incredible spark that I've seen lit in nonprofit organizations as they discover the role of technology and really extending their reach and how it changes the lives of the individuals and families that they serve. Such energy in this space. In fact, Rural List wasn't really doing digital inclusion until the pandemic. Totally relevant to our mission, and we encountered an organization like Speak for America, who we now partner with, and Rural List as well. And so these partnerships and this idea of ecosystem building is really, I hope, the theme that you take away, because we're young in our relationship with one another, really seen a lot of great work happen. And more to come.
Yes, that's very exciting. And I feel like we initially talked about in the panel before us about the covered populations with the Digital Equity Act and how the adult education system sort of interfaces and serves all of them pretty much in different contexts. And one of the other parts of it is that even though we're doing a lot of great work, there's lots of barriers, not just resource barriers, but just barriers that adult learners face as they interact with systems. And all three of you come from very complementary perspectives of serving these populations. And I would love if we can just, go round robin on this, around what strategies are you engaging in to navigate those barriers? Sarah, do you want to go first with the slide where you want the slide?
Sure.
So I think it's probably no surprise. I've been talking about it lots and lots from a adult education perspective around the lack of funding for devices, affordable internet service, digital literacy, and cybersecurity, curriculum development, teacher training, teacher salaries, those kinds of things. No surprise there. Same thing with the lack of capacity, including staff shortages, teacher shortages, the time for staff to work on, or even the state to work on building partnerships that are required for this, providers for implementing time to implement change. Students have limited class time because they're working and balancing their lives, and lots of other initiatives in adult education. And then I think it was, as previously mentioned, the fact that the lack of digital literacy skills and cyber safety skills at the program instructor level, being able to teach somebody else when you don't have a confidence in the skills yourself, can be rather challenging. So I think we have some barriers, and from a state perspective, I'm in the state office. And so we have some demographics that plays a part, at least in New Hampshire. We're a very well-educated state, happens to be a fairly wealthy state. And so there's a perception that digital access is not an issue, when in fact, those of us who work in adult education know that that is not true, or working with the public, with the covered populations. There's also sort of a lack of buy-in on the adult ed community on the importance and the overarching impact of digital equity, because we have so many other things that we're dealing with. At the provider level, I mentioned the comfort level around teachers and their own skills, reluctance to incorporate technology with low-level English language learners, and limited available curriculum. For our professional development system, it hasn't been a priority area between trying to implement all of the other federal initiatives with adult education. It's been there, but it's not been a priority. And so
Teachers and programs need the supports to be able to implement digital literacy, like prep time. They need curriculum development. They need tools. They need time to learn them. And then we have our students who also have limited, devices and limited learner programs. Yep. So strategies. So on the statewide level, the biggest piece was, and again, it came up earlier, is being at the table. I am at the table. And that means working with the Digital Empowerment Group, working with the Asset Advisory Group, building partnerships with the National Collaborative for Digital Equity. We worked with them on a grant, an outreach grant for ACP, which maybe not. We actually got some stuff done before it started winding down, so that was good. Working with our WIOA core partners, also working with some philanthropy and foundations. It's given us an opportunity to build partnerships with organizations and stakeholders that we haven't worked with before, like our 211 system, our libraries, other education and social service organizations. Reading your state plan, I read every single word of the 170 something page document, but also took that document, took the goals and strategies and made the connections for my adult program directors, because they don't have the time. And so when we talk about building a core of digital navigators in the state plan, I said, this is an opportunity for adult ed to build this core of digital navigators. We have this grant money coming that came in from the ACP outreach grant to be able to support being able to do that. Other kinds of support at the statewide level, resources like we are a member of the IDEAL Consortium. So if you're not doing that, you should do that. COABE membership also plays a big role in that. Being able to provide funding when possible, including providing statewide data on for local grants. One of the things that we did right after the pandemic was to do bulk license purchasing for software, because none of our local programs are very small, and it's not cost effective for them to purchase things like Burlington English or Essential Ed and that sort of thing, or North Star. And so we actually did that at the state level. We dispersed those at the state level to maximize the capacity and the use of those licenses. And repetition. I'm a firm believer in saying things 1,000 times and eventually somebody will get it. I do that a lot. There's a lot of opportunity for some additional partnerships that we haven't explored yet with our chambers of commerce, with our community college system, looking at some local grants, and then some of our programs who have tech integrators already there. Yep. Yep, that's fine. And so, again, that long highway or runway of getting to where we need to go, looking to build a pathway that will include building some more awareness around participating in those statewide groups so that everybody understands what adult ed needs, and being very vocal about that, sharing our challenges and our solutions and advocating for those needs we've been doing a bunch of focus groups, and then increasing our state level support, providing some best practices and promising models. Sometimes we have to bring those in from other states. That's fine. We talk about it all the time. And bringing that national perspective to New Hampshire. Promoting some innovative projects. Our latest competition this past year, we actually introduced 2 statewide online adult education programs, one for our diploma and one for our English language learners. We've never done that before, so that was very exciting. And then really trying to figure out how to best leverage our partnerships that exist, but really building some new ones and strengthening those, especially with our core partners, with our digital equity partners, and our regional New England Literacy Resource Center, and pursuing some alternative funding options to build capacity and sustainability.
That's great.
That's a lot.
There's a lot of really impressive work happening in New Hampshire, so I'm not surprised that there's a lot to share, Eric.
Yeah, we don't have core members serving in New Hampshire yet, but we would very much like to, so we can talk about that after. But
Yes.
I think for us, the word you mentioned at the beginning of capacity, right? That is the biggest challenge I think that our organization helps solve. I'll get to these slides in a minute, but I think whether you are a nonprofit who is trying to do work in the community, whether you're a government agency who has resources that have been allocated to you that you're trying to get out into the community, you need capacity. You need like boots on the ground to be able to bring this work to life. And to be able to get community input accurately conveyed in the plans that you are trying to make. And so that's what our core members out in their communities do, is they are that go-between between individual citizens, adult learners in this case, and the organizations that are trying to serve them. It's not something that you can automate. It's not something that you can do with a one-to-many approach. You really need those people on the ground doing that kind of white glove, one-to-one attention to be able to help folks upskill themselves from a digital perspective, and realize all of the promise that digital solutions can provide for people. So, just giving a couple examples of how we do that. So Illinois has been a great partner for us this year. We partnered with two entities, the Illinois Broadband Lab, which kind of functions as the state broadband office, and the Illinois Extension System, so the university system. And they decided to fund a core of about 10 core members across the state of Illinois, each of them serving at a different chapter of the extension system, but all going through kind of similar training that was convened by the Broadband Lab. And that work was amazing. It was kind of a cohort within our 104 member cohort. It was sort of a cohort within the cohort model, to be able to have a really unified approach toward digital equity across the state of Illinois. So that was a really, really awesome example. And we're really trying to work with other entities at the statewide level to try to do that, because it's definitely efficient as compared with an individual, organization doing, one member here or there in a state. The statewide coordination is really helpful. And then if we flip to the next slide, I think we could give a more individual. Yeah, so I just wanted to give, I think a lot of times storytelling of who our members are really helps bring this work to life as well. So this is Tim. Tim is serving in I believe I'm probably gonna butcher the name, but I think it's Couchiching County. It's up on the Canadian border in northern Minnesota. Tim was an adult learner himself, and he had the opportunity to serve his county government and help them advance all of the different digital divide related challenges that they were trying to solve. So Tim is actually our second member serving in that county. We had another member serve this past year. And his work has been amazing. He had a long career with actually the Corn Growers Association prior to doing this program, and it was an incredible way for him to learn new skills and give back to the community that he's been a part of for a long time. And I think we may have one more example in there if we go to the next slide. Kathy is just down the road here in Memphis, Tennessee. Kathy is in our second year serving with us. Her first year she served with Innovate Memphis. She worked with senior citizens across the community, addressing thousands of them to do digital skills and digital literacy training. She worked in housing developments as well, so that was another kind of interesting partner to bring to the table. And Kathy also herself is an adult learner. Now she's actually serving, her host site is actually our organization this year. And she's kind of doing coordinating work across the country, still from her base in Memphis. And so that's an incredible, story as well of how you can go and serve your community directly, then serve our program in another year. And these are the types of stories I think we want to just keep spreading around the country. So, yeah.
Those are great examples. And I have slides too. And I want to go back to, the question you're asking, Priyanka, about barriers, and acknowledge, what's already been said several times in the room today, and is totally correct that, adult learning organizations have been doing this work for a long time, maybe not necessarily using the terminology that we're using right now of digital equity, but you are that digital skill support and that bridge to technology. And I think our learning that I most want to impart to you from this cohort of now 65 organizations in 23 states that LISC has been able to support, rural LISC, has been able to support with private philanthropic dollars to stand up these digital access programs is that these diverse organizations we're all capable of doing this work and contributing to the overall digital equity gains in their community. But as far as a barrier, it did take some time to figure out as an organization, what is my mission and, what are my resources and day-to-day priorities ask of me? And then how does including a new program like this, what does that mean for training my staff, sustaining a position that, might be brought on for the first time with a private grant like what Ruralisk was supporting into the future, if this really becomes like a core, this type of program becomes core to the operation. And so when we think, the way I would answer the question that was asked by Jisoo of NDIA about what we hope to see from the state capacity building grants within the Digital Equity Act is that these one-time dollars really help diverse organizations figure out what's my value add in this digital equity equation. And it could be that some of these organizations like the food banks and libraries and cultural resource organizations and fire stations. We had a fire station that we wrote a really interesting profile about in this network of organizations. They each went through their own journey of sort of figuring out what their contribution is. And it could be that that same population or individual that's coming to your resource center seeking supports in this digital space might also encounter another organization in the community that can offer something additional. And so we learned, across the last 3 years that we've been doing this, that any organizations that's deeply rooted in understanding the needs of the community and responding to them can make a contribution. And the real kind of overcoming of a barrier at the institutional level was figuring out, is a computer access program what I want to offer in the community? It makes sense to advance my mission, or to lean in on the skills question, or to focus on the adoption of internet at the household level and providing for individuals and families to enroll in subsidy programs. So there's no one size fits all is sort of the conclusion across these diverse organizations. And as we go into the state capacity building, as well as the direct competitive grant, Ruralisk is certainly hopeful that state broadband offices are reflecting on this idea of systems building and are awarding grants to organizations that want to figure it out and sort it out and use this one-time money to do that learning. And then, hopefully we would see beyond the state the Digital Equity Act program, sustainability funding from various agencies, inclusive of Department of Commerce, but also the funding streams that come down through the Adult Education Network to really sustain this work long term. So we really see it as important. And I do have a couple of stories, but I'll just share one of those like barrier overcoming stories that may kind of anchor my point here. We worked with a cohort of libraries, which, like adult learning organizations, have been doing digital inclusion for a long time. And these are rural libraries in East Texas. These are sparsely populated, remote areas. And at one time, a state agency had taken a leading role in providing for IT, information technology support, right? There was a professional on call to libraries, and that was a dedicated resource that the Jasper Library in Jasper County could count on. And when that went away a couple of maybe 10 years ago, it really sort of cramped. That was a big, the quote was that losing that resource was a big hit to small rural libraries like the Jasper Library, and left them to discover the sources and figure it out ourselves. And that discovery did happen. And the grant that Lisk was able to pass through from a private foundation that serves East Texas to Jasper County did make a difference in sort of those one-time episodic decisions, but also helped to kind of make interim and long-term planning more feasible, right? And so, as you're thinking about your contribution in the systems development, right, that these dollars, these one-time dollars are going to enable. It's sort of both and, right? The shush booth that Jasper Library was able to install with this one-time grant to explore telehealth as a contribution they can make to the community, as well as funding a 5-year technology plan, right? So that Jasper Library really knows over the next couple of years, what are the subsequent investments they want to make in order to ensure that they have that level of service delivery that meets the expectation the community now has, right? Which is to be very engaged with the Jasper Library and come to rely on it as an amenity. So I think the takeaway for the question that Bianca was asking is that barriers are overcomable at the institutional level, and leaning in and really figuring that out organization by organization, and then at the community sort of systems network level is the most exciting promise, I think, of the state capacity building dollars right now.
Thank you so much for those insights. And I feel like one of the things that we need to really pat ourselves on the back as the adult education system, our individual programs on the ground. I'm familiar with a lot of them all across the 50 states that are doing amazing work in moving the ball forward around digital skill development, ACP when that was a thing. Hopefully it'll continue to be a thing so we can keep on working at it. And then also to really think about digital inclusion and digital equity from a holistic perspective. But that aside, where I think we're today is we need to really think of new ways of working together, because the work that we're all doing is moving, is pushing the digital divide to sort of, close, or we kind of have to build a bridge. At this point, it's too wide, like we need to leapfrog and think about strategies to do that. And I feel like the current funding streams that are open right now, it is a time to really think outside our usual ways of thinking and really think about new ways we can work across systems. And I think, conversations with you, with Ruralist, with LCC, across states, with Sarah, like those are really interesting ideas that you need to be maybe jotting down on this, the paper you have on your desks, on the tables there. One of the things that I wanted to add, as you look at this handout, which we're going to get to shortly, is all three of your closing thoughts around how do you build sustainable partnerships? Because a lot of times the response we get from a lot of programs, systems, it's like we're already under-resourced and we have so much going on. I think we're doing enough, but we all know that the society we live in needs more. And so any insights you have about thinking about sustainable partnerships, building that buy-in at the local level and the national level to help sort of catalyze some interesting thoughts for the audience would be great. I know it's a mouthful, and you probably have 3 minutes each.
Okay.
Well, I think going back to one of the things that was said earlier around the idea of, particularly with the competitive grants, I know that as a small state, we don't have that capacity to go after a multi-million-dollar big grant. But I am very inspired by the conversations that have been happening around what can happen at the national level or in a larger organization that will then filter down into those smaller programs. And the advantage of that is not just that the capacity and the time and that sort of thing, but also the fact that it ties our activities and our practices together. If there's a large organization that has a vision and that we all participate in that vision and become a part of that project, then we have some shared practice across state lines. It's really challenging, when it is very specific to the state. We already have state capacity grants. We have a plan. We have implementation will be what it is. But I think that the competition gives us some opportunities as a national adult education community to work together to build some common practice, to build some strengths across the lines. I know that when I come to things like COABE, I learned so much from my colleagues in other states, and I think the opportunity is just there for that. And this really presents itself as an opportunity.
Just because, Sarah, I know your work really well, can you talk a little bit more about, like, on the state level, you're already breaking down those silos by forging new partnerships across state systems, even within New Hampshire, so that there's something for other people from other states to emulate in their own state, where you have a monthly meeting across different offices.
So yeah, actually, I'm involved in a couple of different things. I think you're talking about Steve, but yeah.
Yes.
So again, we started this committee under the Whole Family's Approach to Jobs, which actually was a national initiative that New Hampshire took on, and our Department of Health and Human Services. They started working with the TANF population and our programming there, and really expanded it. So yeah, we meet on a monthly basis, not just the Department of Education and the Department of Health and Human Services, but we also meet with the National Collaborative for Digital Equity. World Education is a partner in that. We have a representative from Comcast. We have somebody who was formerly in the broadband office and working on somebody in the new broadband office. And then and the libraries, yes. And so having that mix of people working together and just being aware of what we're doing across the lines. And one of the things that we've made as a recommendation and did come in the state plan was to build sort of a dashboard of all of these assets. So not just the asset collecting, which was a requirement for this for the state plan, but also building a usable dashboard where we can continue to find those people. I mean, we're a small state. A lot of people know each other, but you never know what somebody is interested in, even if it's not necessarily their main focus. And so building that into our system so that will be sustainable down the road.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
I just endorse everything Sarah said, and I totally agree that it makes a lot of sense for there to be across state line partnerships going after the national competitive grant. And I would just reflect at the local level, we have a cohort that's graduating from, again, our private philanthropic supported cohort in Arkansas of 7 diverse organizations statewide, and the statewide grant making network saw it as a pilot, right, where a lot of discovery would be happening. And we hope that what will result from the findings that have emerged that these private funders have really been able to digest is that there will be an opportunity to braid together public and private resources in the next 5 years of funding with the states taking the lead in the national competitive program being a factor. And then, in the years beyond, again, as these various funding flows from federal agencies come down, through your, community facing entities and the like. I think the point Sarah made that really resonates with me, thinking about what I've learned from the Arkansas cohort, is just to share a couple of quotes. A participant in that cohort is El Centro Hispano in Jonesboro. And that director described digital inclusion being on the back burner, right, for several years until being part of a cohort delivery model where peers could talk to peers about how they were instituting some of these practices, really brought it forward to the point where El Centro, it was the #1 volunteer in a sort of continuation working group that this private grant maker network had set up, right? That they had really seen the value add to their organization and focusing on digital equity and wanted to be a leader in some of the decision making about how to resource that work going forward, not just in the interest of their own organization, but in the collective. And so we really hope that state broadband offices will value the cohort model, will really invest in kind of long-termism and provide for organizations to have multiple years of funding support, even if it's not to have a dedicated individual, but subsidizing, multiple positions in an organization to really figure out, kind of what that best fit is. But as Sarah's point is so right, you won't know that a peer kind of in your community network has a contribution or a curiosity about this work until you're forging those connections. And what comes to mind is, from one of our initial cohorts, and everybody got a cute name. So this was Team Southern Region. And I'm in fact going to go and call on a sister organization tomorrow when I leave Tennessee and go into Northwest Alabama to visit with the Shoals Chamber. Their peer, the DeKalb Chamber of Commerce, was part of our Team Southern Region. And what the Chamber of Commerce said to us about why they were in the digital inclusion work, or even in the workforce development space, which isn't necessarily like the first thing you think of for chambers taking the lead role on, was that coming to, everyone drawing up a seat at the table helped us appreciate that we were all trying to summit the same mountain, and we were going to get there a lot faster when we, each had a role, right? And so I would underscore that this is the excitement in this one-time money is the possibility of doing something ambitious, that cross state lines, competitive grant that your industry might go after, to this, kind of the state capacity grants focusing on the learning and the experimentation and the trialing and the piloting that can happen when frontline organizations sort of figure out what their best fit is for digital inclusion. Because I think, this is a long-term mountain I think we're trying to summit, and like that community building and capacity building across local networks is really the driver, right? Certainly there's the outcome at the individual and household level, and that perseverance that individuals go through on their digital journey that matters a lot. But what I think also greatly matters is the working in a collective and sort of that spirit of collaboration, at the local level, that it's going to make all the difference to those larger community development outcomes that we're all after.
Thank you, Krista. I think that's really important. And Eric, I think, as you mentioned before, you're already working across silos, you're working across systems. So any insights and lessons you want to share with us?
Yeah. I mean, I think the theme I'm hearing from both Sarah and Krista is it's like you have to have a really strong coalition in everything you're doing when it comes to these these programs. I think you just think about every individual placement that we have, it's going to involve some sort of local community-based organizations, one or many. It's going to involve it could be an adult learner, right, on the core member side, and on the kind of the person being supported side. It might involve a state or local official, municipal, or at the statewide level. We try to keep elected officials abreast of what's happening with all of our placements in their regions. Philanthropy comes to the table to support a lot of these placements when individual community-based organizations can't kind of fund the fee to have a core member serve with them. So there is so much coalition building that goes on in every individual placement, and I think that's so important. It's amazing, no matter how good you are at coalition building, there always are people, I think, that don't necessarily know what you're doing, especially for us as a very young organization. So just using channels to spread awareness are really important as well. And then the only other theme that I really wanted to underscore that we think about a lot is a lot of I think government programs, they are trying to give something to the community, or to a community organization, but what the community organization has to give back in return is a lot, right? You have to give a lot of time to reporting. You have to get, it could be a whole number of things that you have to kind of give in exchange for whatever resource or support that you're getting. And I think that's something we really go to the table with in mind every single time. We want to be a program that brings capacity to local organizations without really asking for a ton in return. And I'm not pretending you don't have to give anything. You have to, think about what you want this core member to do. You have to supervise them. You have to have some funding available, whether it's from you or a philanthropic partner. But outside of that, like we are handling all of the AmeriCorps, we're an AmeriCorps program. We're handling all of the kind of compliance and onboarding that has to do with that. We want the person to be a resource for these community organizations as they try to access other federal or state programs. So we want this to be somebody who can help you get access to other programs. And generally, we just want it to be a turnkey solution. So if you're thinking about a organization in your community that really could use that capacity, I think any of us would be great resources to talk to, and we'd love to work with all of you. So thanks.
Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Krista, Eric, and Sarah, for sharing your insights and, just lessons from your leadership and experience in the field, and your commitment to digital equity. And thank you all for your undivided attention as we sort of talked at you for the past 90 minutes. But I hope these conversations between the two panels have really sparked a lot of ideas, validated some of your own ideas as we move into the more interactive, let's talk to each other part of the agenda. And I will give it to Jisoo. Thank you so much.
Actually, can we give another round of applause to Priyanka for her great job in moderating? So as Priyanka mentioned, as much as we'd like to continue sharing information with you, that's not what you're here to do. You're not here to just hear us talk for 3 hours. So this is where we get to sort of the interactive part of the agenda. For the in-person attendees, stay right where you are because you should have a facilitator at each of your desks. And if you do not, after I do the transition, please join a neighboring table that does have a facilitator. Online attendees, thank you for your patience, online attendees, with the audio situation. You will be taken automatically to your breakout rooms in a moment along with an online facilitator, so you shouldn't have to do anything either. So just quick instructions, and your facilitator will go over this with you when you arrive in your breakouts, but you're going to begin with some reflections from the fireside chat that I had with NTIA and NDIA, and also the panel discussion that Priyanka just moderated. And then the facilitators are going to run you through a series of thought-provoking questions to help you sort of develop your vision around digital equity and your ideation around what your own roles can be as catalysts for digital equity in adult education. At the end of that activity, you're going to upload a 4-sentence abstract of your ideas on that same Padlet that you were dropping your questions in. And there's a column for each of the breakout groups, and your facilitators will go through how that abstract will look. And then if you haven't used Padlet before, when you go to the Padlet link, it's going to look something like this. And then you're just going to press the plus button at your column to drop in your 4-sentence abstract. Again, your facilitators will help you go through what each of those sentences will be. And then final instructions to allow your peers in this room, as well as in the online space, to maybe reach out to you after this pre-conference with feedback and additional resources. If you feel comfortable, when you drop in your 4-sentence abstract, please include your name, organization, some sort of contact information, so folks in this room that might not be in your breakout group can reach out to you with additional feedback and resources. Okay, everybody feel good? Give me a thumbs up if you feel good about those instructions. Awesome. I'm group 5, and I'm going to go over there in just a minute. Great. And break. Well, that was a really solid hour of discussion. I had the best group, by the way. They were really engaged. But So we're going to move on to the virtual gallery walk. We opted for a virtual gallery walk to, make space for our online attendees as well. But continue dropping in your 4-sentence summaries of your ideas at your tables. But as you do so, take a look at some of the other columns and the ideas folks dropped in from the other tables, right? And you can, use the heart button if you like that idea, but add comments, add substance, add feedback. If this is someone that you feel like you have a common vision with and you want to work with, drop that in. And if you're comfortable, again, dropping your, name, organization, contact information, because what we're here to do is build those relationships between people who share a vision for advancing digital equity in adult education, right? So for the next, let's say 15-ish minutes, continue dropping in those 4-sentence abstracts, but as you do so, take a look at ideas from other columns and add in your feedback. If you have resources that you want to recommend to those folks, someone in my table told another person that they have a session at COABE conference, happening on Wednesday that responds to an idea that they had. So if you have things like that, I recommend that to them. And again, if you haven't used Padlet before, this is what it will look like when you get on there. You can use the heart button to react, and then you should be able to directly comment underneath folks' ideas. So let's do that for the next 15-ish more minutes. Do this activity. So I hope the virtual gallery walk was a helpful experience in helping sort of build those sort of cross-table relationships, along with the folks that joined from the online side of things as well. So we're just going to move into sort of the closing phase of our convening. We have recorded remarks from my boss, Assistant Secretary Roberto Rodriguez, who leads the Office of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development that the Office of Ed Tech falls under. So I'll play that in a moment. Because of the audio situation, I'm not sure that the online folks will be able to hear his voice, but the video is captioned. So I apologize again for the online attendees. I wish we would have figured out the AV long beforehand, but sorry about that. So I'm going to play the video now with his remarks.
before in that way. So I just really want to encourage you as we, but I also really want to thank Jisoo because he has worked so much behind the scenes and done such a great job really planning this event. I also want to thank Catalina Gomez and Shirley Doan, who did a fantastic job preparing for those 2 webinars. And I would be remiss to not thank our staff who was behind the scenes as well, staffing the 2 webinars and putting up the information on the website, the forms and that sort of thing. So thank you, everybody. And I just want to, as we close out, call Shaketa up to say the last few words here for COABE. I want to also encourage you all tomorrow, we're going to have a digital equity panel session at the general session. So I want to really encourage you to come to that. And thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Sharon. I know some of you have been with us here today in this room all day today. Thank you so much. I hope all the information that was provided will really enable you to go back into your programs and give you some inspiration, but also the knowledge of how you can make the next steps. The one true thing that has been the theme of the entire day is how valuable partnerships are. Being able to connect and stretch out across the room, across your counties, across your cities, and bring others along to talk about the work that needs to be done, to talk about the work that is being done, and how we can forge a path together in the future is truly your call of action for today. So thank you so much for kicking off our pre-conference. Get out there, please enjoy this beautiful hotel, this beautiful host city, and we look forward to seeing you tomorrow for our sessions and our general open. Thank you so much. Have a good one.